What would you do if the person you trusted most used your absence not to miss you, but to erase you? That's the question that haunted me in the middle of the desert, under a burning sky, with a rifle on my back and silence in my chest. 1. Email. 13 years of marriage gone. Joint accounts emptied. Another man living in the house I bought. And the only explanation? Let's move forward. Most stories about betrayal are loud, shouting, accusations, courtroom drama. Mine was quiet, strategic, and in the end, it wasn't just about getting even. It was about exposing a system built to take advantage of those who serve quietly, sacrifice fully, and never see it coming. If you've ever wondered how deep betrayal can go, and how calm, calculated justice actually works, this is a story you won't want to miss. Before we begin, take a moment to subscribe if you appreciate true stories told with clarity, emotion, and purpose. Drop a comment if you've ever experienced a moment that changed everything in a single message. And stay with me. Because this isn't just a story about revenge. It's a story about how one man refused to break and chose to rebuild instead. Let's begin. I was in northern Iraq in the middle of a 3-week mission when I got the email. We were stationed near Mosul, and the sandstorms hadn't let up in days. I'd just come back from perimeter patrol, boots still heavy with dust, when my phone buzzed. I expected an update from command, or maybe a message from my wife, Lana. What I got instead was a subject line that read, "Let's move forward." That phrase will sit in the back of your mind like a splinter when it's attached to the end of your marriage. The message was brief, cold, precise, like a resignation letter. Lana had already filed for divorce. She'd already emptied our joint accounts, and she'd already moved someone else into our home. "His name is Owen," she wrote. "Please don't make this harder than it already is." I didn't throw the phone. I didn't curse. I didn't even breathe for a moment. I just stared at the words, trying to convince myself it was a joke. Then I locked the screen, slipped the phone into my vest, and headed for the debriefing tent. That night I replied with a single word. Understood. No begging, no argument, no questions. I believe in letting people show you who they really are, without interruption. Back in the barracks, no one asked me why I was quieter than usual. You don't need to say much in a combat zone. Silence speaks volumes. My team lead, Sergeant Cruz, gave me a look during briefing but didn't push. I appreciated that. In the Army, you learn to compartmentalize pain. Bury it deep, then keep moving. But what Lana didn't know was this. I may not start fights, but I don't lose them. And while she thought she was getting away clean, I had already set the first pieces in place. This was no longer about heartbreak. This was going to be a mission, and I never leave a mission unfinished. The next morning I woke up before first light and laced my boots like nothing had changed. That's what they don't tell you about betrayal. It doesn't explode. It leaks. Slow, silent, like a crack in your foundation you only notice after the walls start to shift. I didn't tell anyone in my unit what had happened. Not Cruz, not Foster, not my bunkmate Ruiz, who used to call Lana the saint because she sent us care packages with notes in perfect cursive. None of them needed to know. Not yet. But the silence wasn't emptiness. It was calculation. Lana. And I had been married for 13 years. We met in Charleston. She was a crisis counselor for veterans, working at a nonprofit. Irony isn't always poetic. Sometimes it just hurts. At first, she was everything I wasn't. Empathetic, emotional, talkative. She'd cry during commercials. I'd zone out during funerals. She said I needed someone to teach me softness. I told her softness is how people get hurt, and over time, I softened. Or I tried to. 6 months before deployment, something shifted. The first sign was small. She stopped asking about my day. Then she started coming home later. New yoga studio, she said, different schedule. A month after that, she changed the passcode on her phone. I didn't ask. I noticed. She stopped laughing at my dry jokes, stopped sitting on the same side of the couch. Started buying detox teas and talking about energy work with people I'd never met. She said I'd gotten cold, that I shut down too often. Maybe she was right, but I wasn't blind. And I wasn't stupid. I noticed when she'd come home from work smelling like expensive cologne, when she got a new gym membership and used it only once a week, same day, same hour. I noticed the new friend named Owen she kept referencing, in casual conversation like I wouldn't pick up the pattern. I never confronted her. That's not who I am. My father used to say, don't speak until you're sure, don't act until you're ready, and don't trust what panics. So I waited. I observed, and I made quiet notes. One evening, 2 weeks before my flight overseas, she kissed me on the cheek and said, promise me you'll stay safe, Her voice cracked like she meant it. Her eyes didn't. That night I started gathering documents, birth certificates, the deed to our home, copies of my discharge records, my VA pension, and I started making arrangements, not because I knew what was coming, but because I refused to be caught flat-footed again. Looking back now, I think I always knew. Somewhere deep in the part of me trained to spot patterns, predict behavior, read landscapes before the first shot is fired. I knew this wasn't just loneliness. It was departure. And she was already halfway gone. But if she thought I'd be the kind of man who folded in the face of betrayal, she forgot one thing. I've survived war. This wasn't going to break me. It was going to sharpen me. The night Lana dropped me off at the base, she kissed me with her eyes open. It was a small thing, but I caught it. You can tell when someone's heart has left the room. Her hug was light, her smile almost rehearsed. Be safe, okay? She said, voice cracking just enough to sound believable. But I knew that sound. I'd heard it before in briefings before. A bad mission. Just enough emotion to seem real, but not enough to mean anything. As I watched her drive away, I felt something inside me shift. Not break. Just harden. 2 days later, before my deployment flight out of Fort Campbell, I rented a storage unit on the far end of town. Nothing fancy, just a concrete cube behind a shuttered strip mall. Inside, I placed everything I couldn't afford to lose. The deed to our house, my birth certificate and discharge papers, my grandfather's watch, a Watu relic passed down with pride, my mother's silver cross, the only thing she wore until cancer, took her printed copy of our marriage license, just in case I needed proof of what we used to be, labeled the box, assets, Briggs. Locked it, took the only key. That was step 1. Step 2. I walked into a small credit union 20 miles from where we lived, one that didn't sync with our regular bank. I opened a personal account and set up a direct deposit for 25% of my paycheck. I told the clerk I was diversifying. She nodded and handed me the forms. I signed them and walked out with the confidence that if everything went south, I wouldn't be starting from zero. I wasn't paranoid. I was trained. In the Army, you don't wait for the first explosion to prepare. You plan for what might go wrong, and you do it quietly. Back home, Lana had no idea. She still smiled when she needed to. Still sent me off with packed snacks and folded laundry. But there was no softness left. No shared looks. No lingering touch. Just the performance of a wife. I noticed everything. How she stopped asking me about my day. How she started using vague phrases like healing space and reclaiming selfhood. How she started seeing a life coach who posted shirtless pictures on Instagram with hashtags like sacred masculinity. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't blind. But I wasn't confrontational either. That's not how I was raised. My father used to say, when a man knows what he knows, he doesn't need to shout it. So I said nothing. I observed. I also called Mark. Mark Lopez had once pulled me out of a ditch in Kandahar with a bullet, lodged 2 inches from my spine. After the Army, he became a lawyer. Damn good one. We kept in touch, played poker every few months, swapped stories we couldn't tell anyone else. I met him for coffee 3 weeks before deployment. Something's not right, I said. He leaned back. How bad? I don't know yet, but I want to be ready. He didn't ask more questions, just nodded and said, "Give me copies of everything. House papers, joint accounts, loan info. If it blows up, I'll be ready to move fast." That's when I knew I wasn't overreacting. Because Mark didn't tell me to calm down, he told me to prepare. Funny thing is, Lana and I used to be good. Really good. We met in 2010 at a trauma healing workshop for returning veterans. She wasn't a soldier. She was a counselor. Civilian. Calm voice. Open eyes. A little too into candles and herbal teas. I was raw. Angry. Drinking too much. Sleeping too little. She didn't flinch. Said I didn't need fixing. Just patience. She was the first person in years who looked at me like I was human. We moved fast. Moved in together after 6 months. Married within a year. Bought the house 2 years later. A modest 2-story in Columbia with a yard big enough for a dog and dreams. My name was on the mortgage, but I added hers to the deed. She called it romantic, I called it practical. The early years were good. We fought like anyone else, but we laughed more than we yelled. She'd make playlists for my deployments and cry at old war movies. She even volunteered with military families for a while. Then came the drift. Slow at first, then sharp. In 2018, I was promoted and began spending more time overseas. She said she was proud. Then she said she was tired. Then she stopped saying anything at all. She filled the silence with spiritual retreats and yoga certifications. I filled it with drills, logistics, and mission reports. One night I got home from a 3-week field op and she was out, again. No note, no text. Just a house that didn't feel like mine anymore. Still, I didn't raise my voice, I didn't accuse. I packed a go bag, not with weapons, with documents because I didn't know exactly what was coming. But my instincts told me something was. And if Lana thought I'd just crumble thousands of miles away while she made her moves, she'd forgotten what kind of man she married. War zones teach you to expect the unexpected. But betrayal? That hits different. It was just after chow when it happened. I'd finished a long, dusty shift on patrol and was halfway through my first bite of dinner when my phone buzzed. One vibration, then another. Both were alerts from our joint bank account, 2 transfers flagged for unusual activity. I opened the app. The first transaction was for $44,000. The second, minutes later, was for $48,000, total, $92,000. Every cent of our savings, drained in the time it took me to shovel a spoonful of rehydrated beef stew. I froze. My tray slid slightly off the table. I grabbed it, steadied it, set it down slowly. Everything around me blurred. The laughter, the trays clinking, the boots stomping past. My ears rang, not from nearby gunfire, but from realization. Lana had cleaned out everything. Everything we built. Everything I fought for, gone. No warning, no explanation. Just clean, calculated withdrawal. I got up quietly, nodded to Cruz when he passed me with a can of Monster in his hand, and walked back to my quarters. Inside the prefab container we called a barracks, I sat on the edge of my cot. The room was dim, lit by a single bulb that flickered when the generator sputtered. The air was still hot and dry even at night. Ruiz was passed out across from me, his arm hanging over the edge of his bunk, snoring softly. I pulled out my phone and opened the account history. The damage was precise. She'd been transferring money in small amounts for weeks. $1,500 here, $2,000 there. Too minor to trigger alerts, just enough to avoid suspicion. But today she went for the kill. The big transfers hit less than 48 hours after her email. Her timing wasn't emotional, it was tactical. That told me everything I needed to know. I didn't yell, didn't throw my phone, didn't pace or punch a wall. I opened another app, my home security system. I'd installed cameras 6 months before. Deployment framing it as extra protection while I was away. Lana called it overkill. But I insisted, and after a while she forgot they even existed. I tapped into the feed. Our living room came into view. Nothing fancy, just the couch I picked out during a holiday sale, the coffee table I built from pine wood during a quiet weekend home, the rug she loved from that artisan shop in Asheville, and there she was, Lana, hair pulled back, wearing the oversized hoodie I used to sleep in. Next to her, sprawled out like he owned the place, was a man I'd only seen once before, on her social media. Owen. He was drinking from my travel mug. Feet propped up on my table. My dog, Scout, lay curled beside his leg, tail wagging like nothing was wrong. And Lana? She laughed. I couldn't hear the joke, but it didn't matter. They were at ease, comfortable, settled, as if I didn't exist anymore. I watched them for 10 minutes. No movement, no emotion, just quiet processing. I wasn't angry. Not in the way people expect. What I felt was colder, sharper, like a switch flipped somewhere deep in my spine, a tension I hadn't felt since Kandahar, that sense that a line had been crossed and there was no going back. I closed the feed, opened notes, and started typing. Mission, reclamation contact mark, pull full account records, export security footage, review, pension and retirement locks, begin asset recovery strategy, check for fraudulent signatures, report preliminary activity to JAG fraud unit. I wrote it like a mission brief, one task per line, one step at a time, no emotion, just execution. People assume heartbreak breaks you, that it sends you spiraling, but sometimes it focuses you, clears the fog. And what Lana didn't understand was this. I had spent my life surviving in chaos. I had trained my mind to operate under pressure. I had seen loss in its most violent, irreversible form. And I had made peace with it. What she did wasn't war. It was theft, of money, of trust, of home. But she made one mistake. She assumed I would take it. She forgot I had the tools to take it all back. I didn't tell Lana I was coming home. I didn't tell anyone. I filed for emergency leave under a clause rarely used, one meant for financial fraud or home ownership crises. It was approved within 48 hours. I packed my gear, signed off with command, and boarded a military flight out of Iraq with a duffel bag, a hard drive full of surveillance footage, and a clear plan. I didn't feel like a man returning home from war. I felt like someone heading into a quieter, more personal battlefield, the kind that doesn't leave shrapnel in your body, just scars on your trust. I arrived in Charleston under a cloudy sky, humidity thick enough to hang on your skin. I didn't go home. Instead, I checked into a roadside motel off Highway 17. Under a different name, I used cash, left no trace. The first call I made was to Mark. He picked up after one ring. "Where are you?" he asked. "Back," I said. "Ready?" His voice didn't waver. "I've been waiting." We met that afternoon at a diner on the edge of town, the kind of place with cracked leather booths and burnt coffee that never stops flowing. Mark slid into the booth with a folder, the size of a combat manual, and a look that said, "You're not going to like what I found." He opened the folder and pointed to a document near the front. "This is a refinance application, dated 2 months ago. $285,000 pulled against your house's equity." I narrowed my eyes. "My name's on that?" "Forged," he said. "Sloppy. Whoever did it got your middle initial wrong and used an old signature from a rental lease, not your official one. We confirmed it with a handwriting expert this morning." I sat back, my hands clenched slowly. "Lana?" I asked, though I already knew. "And Owen." They co-signed. She listed him as a live-in partner, said you were unreachable, claimed hardship. I closed my eyes for a long beat. What else? Mark flipped through the next few pages. "They've been pulling from the new account since the loan cleared. Trips, online orders, coaching services. And get this, wire transfers to a business consultant named Daniel Rourke." "Who the hell is that?" "Funny you ask. I looked him up. Rourke isn't a real consultant. He's a front. Shell LLC used in multiple real, Estate scams, and here's the kicker. He's connected to a local agent named Cynthia Weller. The name meant nothing to me. Mark raised a brow. She just posted a listing this week, your house. My jaw clenched. You're telling me they're trying to sell my home while I'm on deployment? They're not trying, he said. They've already started, photos, virtual tour, asking prices low, just enough to draw quick cash offers. Looks like they're hoping for a fast flip before anyone can contest. I stared at the grainy printout of the listing. My living room, my hardwood floors, my walls. But none of it looked like mine anymore. She's not just leaving, I muttered. She's erasing me. Mark leaned in. Then let's make it unforgettable. We drove straight to the bank where the refinance was processed. I walked in wearing my uniform, my ID clipped to my collar, and a stack of original documents under my arm. The loan officer, mid-30s, pale, nervous, met us in a side office. I showed him my military ID, my authentic signature on my license, and a notarized document proving my deployment timeline. When he saw the discrepancies, his face went white. I'll need to report this immediately, he stammered. I already have, I said. But I wanted you to see it firsthand. And I need your cooperation if this goes federal. He nodded quickly, sweat forming at his temple. Of course, absolutely. The next stop was the county clerk's office. Mark helped me file a formal dispute of the refinance, citing fraud and unauthorized signature. We submitted notarized statements, security footage, and filed a temporary injunction blocking any changes to the property title. We also flagged the property in the National Title Database to prevent transfer. Then we submitted a restraining notice to the real estate board, freezing the listing pending investigation. That night, back in the motel, I watched the house from my phone. Owen's car was in the driveway. Scout barked once when the door opened. I saw Lana walk out onto the porch with a glass of wine in hand. She was smiling. For a brief moment, I wanted to believe it was all a mistake, that somehow she had been confused, pressured, manipulated, that maybe Owen had pulled the strings. But that hope lasted exactly 5 seconds until she turned and kissed him. Not rushed, not hidden, open, bold. I closed the feed and opened my email. Subject, evidence submission. I attached everything. Documents, footage, logs. Sent it to the Veterans Affairs Legal Division and CC'd the South Carolina Fraud Task Force. Within 30 minutes, I got a response. Thank you for your detailed report. Based on the nature of your case, we are escalating this to the federal level. Please make yourself available for contact in the coming days. I shut the laptop. No fist pumps, no satisfaction, just steady breath. I wasn't done. I was just laying the first bricks of a wall that would bury them. I didn't want revenge. I wanted restoration. The next day, the first agent called. The morning after I submitted everything to the federal task force, I sat in the motel parking lot with a black coffee going cold in my hand and a gut full of silence. I wasn't sure what came next. I'd done my part, submitted the evidence, filed the injunctions, secured the house legally. But that wasn't enough. Not yet. Because Lana still thought I was halfway across the world. She still believed I was blind, powerless, stuck. That illusion was my greatest weapon, and I wasn't done using it. I pulled out my phone and logged back into the security system. This time I activated the audio feed, something I'd rarely used before. The living room mic clicked on. At first, nothing, just ambient sound. Then, footsteps. A door opened. Owen's voice. So when's the listing going live? He asked. End of the week, Lana replied. Cynthia said she already has someone lined up with cash. If we price it just under market, it'll move fast. What, about your husband? He said, laughing like it was a joke. You sure he's not going to show up in the middle of the deal? Lana exhaled. Daniel's not like that. He's passive. Always puts others first. Always calm. He'll sign whatever he has to if we frame it right. I pressed pause and stared at the ceiling of my car. She didn't just misunderstand me. She underestimated me. I sent the clip directly to Agent Freeman from the Fraud Division. No subject line, no explanation. just the file. A few hours later, I parked 2 blocks from the house. Not close enough to be seen, but with a clear visual from behind a construction site. I watched the driveway through binoculars, every detail, sinking into my memory. At exactly 10:12 a.m., a silver BMW pulled up. The side panel read, Cynthia Weller, Real Estate Solutions. She stepped out in heels, tablet in hand, dressed like she'd done this 1,000 times. Lana met her at the front door. They hugged like old friends. Owen stepped out a moment later and handed Cynthia a coffee. They all laughed. Easy, relaxed, no sign of worry. No sense that the walls were closing in. I started recording from my phone. They entered the house. I waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. At 32 minutes, the front door opened again. Cynthia stepped out, phone pressed to her ear. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could see the gestures. She was talking about listing angles, staging plans, offer timelines. A practiced seller, confident, controlled. But she didn't know something crucial. I'd already shared her name with federal agents, and her license number, and her previous listing records. Mark had found at least 2 past cases with sudden sales tied to women divorcing deployed spouses. In both cases, the husband had no knowledge until after the sale closed. The pattern was clear. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a model. I waited until nightfall. The house was quiet again, the cameras still rolling. I watched Lana curl up on the couch with a blanket, my blanket, and scroll through her phone. She smiled at something. Maybe a message from Owen. Maybe a Zillow alert. I opened the camera settings. Selected Cloud Backup. Then I opened another window, email to Agent Freeman. This time I added Mark and the state real estate fraud. Office.subject line, Operation active, real-time evidence enclosed. I attached the day's footage. I included timestamps. I listed every name, every quote. I finished with a single sentence. They're finalizing the setup. You need to move. Now. I hit send, and then I waited. But not with tension. With resolve. Because now it wasn't just my home they were threatening, it was my dignity. And that's something I refused to let anyone sell. It all came down the next morning. I was standing outside, a hardware store, pretending to browse drill bits when my phone vibrated in my pocket. Unknown number. I answered on instinct. A clipped voice came through. Clear, direct, no small talk. This is Special Agent Freeman with the Department of Veterans Affairs Fraud Unit. We've reviewed your footage and confirmed patterns consistent with multiple cases under current investigation. We need to meet. Today. I gave him the address to my motel. He didn't question it, just said, be ready in 30. I was. Freeman arrived with a second agent, a woman named Patel, sharp eyes behind steel-rimmed glasses, clipboard in hand. They stepped into my room like they'd done this 100 times. No emotion, no wasted movement. Professionals. Mr. Briggs, Patel said, scanning the room. We've been watching a network of real estate fraud involving military families. Your case fits the profile. If you're willing to cooperate, your evidence could break this wide open. I nodded once. Everything I have is backed up and organized by date. Footage, documents, conversations, screenshots, timeline logs. Freeman raised an eyebrow. That's unusual. Most people bring us a box of tears and confusion. I looked him in the eye. I'm not most people. He smiled, just a twitch of it, and sat down. For the next hour, we went through everything. I showed them how the money was moved when it started, how Owen's name appeared suddenly on documents tied to the refinance, how the house was listed under market with a suspiciously fast timeline, how Cynthia had prior ties to similar cases. I showed them how Lana used my deployment as cover to push it all forward, assuming I'd never look, never return, never fight back. Patel took notes. Freeman asked questions. When it was done, they looked at each other for a long second, silent communication passing between them like a baton. Freeman stood. We're moving in tomorrow. We want them comfortable, confident, overexposed. You stay quiet. No contact, no warning. I've got no interest in warning anyone, I said. They left and I went back to watching. The next day, the sun rose over Charleston like any other. Except this time, justice was in motion. At 10:03 a.m., a black SUV rolled up to the house. Cynthia arrived 2 minutes later. Owen came out to greet her with a smirk and a handshake. They stood on the porch sipping coffee, Lana joining them shortly after, all smiles and false futures. Inside, according to the camera audio, they were reviewing final staging notes. By the end of the week, Cynthia said, you'll have offers. That quick close investor I mentioned, he's ready. Owen laughed. Told you this would be easy. Then he added, military guys never make noise. They're too busy being noble. That was it. That sentence tipped the balance. At exactly 10:28, 3 unmarked vehicles pulled up without sound. Doors opened. Agents moved fast. FBI vests out. Voices low but firm. I watched it all from my phone. Lana froze on the porch, coffee slipping from her hand. Owen stepped back, palms out. Cynthia tried to run but made it 2 steps before being stopped cold. Handcuffs clicked. Papers were served. The house I'd bought, that they tried to flip, had become a crime scene. Within the hour, I received a message from Agent Patel. All 3 in custody. Confiscated documents. Devices secured. We'll be in touch for your final statement. I drove by the house later that day. From a block away, I could still see the yellow tape across the front door. A neighbor stood outside, whispering to someone across the street. Small-town voices travel fast. Parked down the road, I looked up at the windows of what used to be my home. I saw movement inside. Agents cataloging, photographing, bagging evidence. All of it coming apart now, like a stage play exposed under the wrong lighting. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Lana. Text only. What's happening? The FBI is here. Please answer me. I didn't know it would go this far. I didn't respond. What was there to say? That I warned her without warning? That I let her dig the hole herself? That sometimes silence is the loudest weapon you can use? Turned off the screen and sat back in the driver's seat, letting the engine idle. For the first time in weeks, I felt the air move differently. Not with anger, not even with victory, with finality. That night I didn't sleep. Not because I was restless, but because there was nothing left to plan. The operation was over. The damage had been assessed. The trap had been sprung. And the people who thought they were writing the final chapter of my life were now listed as suspects in a federal case. I lay on the motel bed staring at the ceiling fan, letting it hum above me, feeling the strange quiet of completed purpose. Around midnight, my phone buzzed again. Lana. Another message. Daniel, please talk to me. I didn't know everything Owen was doing. I never meant to hurt you like this. I read it. Once. Twice. My thumb hovered over the reply button. I didn't press it. At 7:13 a.m., she called. I let it ring. Again at 9:40. I let it ring again. And then at 10:02, a voicemail. I listened. Her voice was cracked. She sounded like someone trying to cry without admitting they were crying. I know I messed up. I know I betrayed you. But I didn't plan all of it. I didn't know about the fraud, the refinance, the fake accounts. Owen told me you were cutting me out, hiding money, that you'd left us with nothing. I believed him because I wanted to, because I was angry and lonely and stupid. And now I don't know what's going to happen to me. Please. I need you to at least tell the FBI I wasn't part of the scam. I didn't sign the house listing. I didn't know. I sat in silence for a long time after the message ended. I thought about the woman I married, the one who packed care packages for my unit, who cried when we bought our first dog, who used to stay awake just to hear my voice when I called from overseas. And then I thought about the woman who signed away our future with someone else while I was defending the flag she said she respected. Mark called later that day. They're asking how you want to proceed, he said. Lana hasn't been charged yet, but her involvement is borderline. They'll take your statement seriously. I didn't answer right away, then I said, I want what's mine. Nothing more. I want the money back, I want full title on the house, I want my pension untouched, and I want a written confession from her admitting the forgery. If she gives that, I won't press charges. But she doesn't get to walk away clean." Mark was quiet. "You sure?" "Dead sure," I said. "She doesn't deserve prison, but she deserves consequence." A week later, Lana signed the agreement. Full restitution, removal from the deed, forfeiture of any financial claim. A notarized statement admitting her role, her knowledge, and the moment she realized she'd crossed the line. And with that, it was done. 13 years of marriage reduced to a signature and silence. I watched her walk out of the county courthouse, head down, heels clicking across the pavement like they didn't know which direction to go anymore. I didn't speak. I didn't wave. I just turned around and walked away. Some things don't need closure in words. They just need to end. And this was the end. Betrayal, when it comes from someone you love, doesn't feel like a crime at first. It feels like confusion, like trying to read a sentence that suddenly stops making sense. But what happened to Daniel Briggs wasn't just heartbreak. It was calculated financial abuse, identity fraud, and real estate manipulation. As a psychologist and legal advisor working with military families, I've seen versions of this story more times than I'd like to admit. Soldiers return home expecting stability, only to find their lives dismantled in their absence. What makes Daniel's case extraordinary isn't just the betrayal, it's how he responded. No screaming, no desperate revenge, no public shaming. Instead, he followed a principle that few people in emotional pain can hold on to. Do not react, strategize. The emotional cost of being betrayed by a spouse is high enough. But when that betrayal includes forging documents, draining joint assets, and attempting to sell a house out from under someone during deployment, it crosses a legal and moral threshold. In Daniel's case, he had every right, legally and emotionally, to push for the harshest penalties. But he didn't. He asked for what was his. He demanded accountability, and he stopped just short of vengeance. That kind of restraint isn't weakness, it's control. It's power. It's the definition of justice without self-destruction. In family, court, and financial fraud cases, intent matters, but so does consequence. Lana may not have masterminded the fraud, but she played her part. She allowed herself to believe a lie because it suited her resentment, her loneliness, her desire to blame someone else for the choices she was making. That doesn't make her innocent. It makes her accountable. The sad truth is that cases like this often go unpunished because the victims are too emotionally shattered or too publicly humiliated to speak up. But Daniel's methodical approach changed that. He didn't just protect himself. He helped expose a wider criminal ring. The evidence he collected and submitted became a key part of an active federal case now linked to similar scams targeting military families in 3 states. In doing so, he became something more than a victim. He became a witness, a whistleblower, a quiet force for justice. His story reminds us that dignity is not in silence alone, but in what you choose to do after silence. That sometimes the calmest voice in the room is the one that brings the storm. And that justice, when it arrives without rage, can be louder than any scream. A year later, the house was gone. Not sold, just abandoned by me. I couldn't stay. Not because of the furniture or the floors or the memories, but because every wall had absorbed something I could never fully scrub out. I handed the keys to the county trustee, forfeited the property under restitution, and walked away without looking back. I bought a small cabin outside of Missoula, Montana. 2 bedrooms, no neighbors, no noise, just trees, a stream, and enough sky to remind me that peace doesn't have to shout. The cabin came unfinished, which was perfect. I needed something to build, something that didn't carry anyone else's choices. I spent the next 6 months doing what I used to call therapy before I knew what it really meant. Cutting wood, replacing beams, sanding down what was rough. Every nail was a sentence, every board a full stop. By the time it was done, it looked nothing like the house I lost. It was smaller, quieter, and more mine than anything had ever been. I adopted a German shepherd from a rescue shelter. I named him Recon, We walk the trails every morning. No leash. He doesn't run away. I think he understands what it means to want to stay close when you've lost something too. I started doing small carpentry jobs for locals, fixing porches, repairing fences, teaching retired folks how to sand down cabinets or build their own chairs. It doesn't pay much, doesn't have to. My pension covers the rest. One afternoon I got a letter in the mail. No return address, just a name, Rachel. Inside was a handwritten note. You don't know me, but my husband is in the Navy. We almost lost our house to the same scam. The FBI said your case helped them stop it. You saved us, thank you. I read it twice, then pinned it above my workbench right next to the blueprint for the kitchen table I never got to build for Lana. Every time I look at that letter, I remember something important. You don't always get to choose how people leave your life, but you do get to choose what kind of life you build after they're gone. If this story meant something to you, if it reminded you that quiet strength is still strength or that justice doesn't have to come with rage, I hope you'll share it. Leave a comment, subscribe, or just let me know in your own words. What would you have done differently? Because in the end, maybe that's what matters most. Not what they took, but what you rebuilt, and who you became because of it.